All right, welcome to the first episode of this show. Maybe it'll be a show that continues to run, maybe not. I don't know that we have a title for it yet, but we've been kicking around some ideas. I'm Robert, and this is Darin. Say hi, Darin,
Hello, Robert.
or RJ, whatever you want to call me. Darin and I have an interest in the paranormal and UFOs and the like, and we were texting one day and we both realized that after years of knowing each other, we'd never had this conversation. It just never had come up. That we had both had sightings. Darren, what's a sighting when you see it, but like don't make contact? There's like the
What?
grades, right?
Yeah, that's close encounter of the first kind, I think.
The first guy. Now I'm gonna have to look it up live on the show.
I believe
Look
it's
up
close, and I believe that's a close encounter of the first kind.
encounters of the. All right, let's see. The fourth kind.
Fourth kind's abduction, right? Or you actually make like contact, or there's communication. I think third kind is like you see an entity.
Yeah, so I guess. Holy shit. There's like seven kinds.
Now they've changed it since I've last looked at it.
They changed it since the last time you were abducted. Uh,
I'll tell you about a strange dream I had here in a bit, and I don't know what to make of it, but
well, so they had these are the extensions of J. Allen Hynek's scale. So J. Allen Hynek's scale has uh, the first kind is a visual sighting of an unidentified flying object,
right.
seemingly less than 500 feet away, that show an appreciable, is that a word? Appreciable angular extension
Mhm.
and considerable detail. The second kind shows a UFO in which an event in which physical effect is aligned. I'm sorry, is alleged or alleged, depending on your emphasis there. This can be an interference in the functioning of a vehicle or an electronic device, animals reacting, physiological effects such as paralysis or heat discomfort. Sorry. And the third kind is a UFO encounter which an animated entity is present. So we're looking at, I guess, EBEs. And then the extensions are the fourth kind, which is a human is abducted. The fifth kind is a UFO event that involves direct communication between aliens and humans.
Okay.
And the sixth kind is a death of a human or animal associated with a UFO sighting. And the seventh kind is the creation of a human alien hybrid. Bum, bum, bum.
Um,
So we both had, I guess, first encounters, right?
yeah, I would say all the encounters that I have had would be first of the first kind.
You say all, so you've had more than one.
I've had multiple.
They're out to get you. What is the old saying? It's just because you're not paranoid doesn't
Right,
mean they're
doesn't
not
mean
out to
they're
get
out,
you.
not out to get you, right? Uh, yeah, my actually, so like the very first one I remember, I was two or three, and I still vividly remember it because it was so odd. And I was with my parents, and we were coming back from my great grandmother's house, and she lived in a little rural town called St. Anne, which is east of Kankakee, Bradley, Bourbonnais, where I grew up. And I distinctly remember this metallic top like object, like hovering. Um, I don't know how far above the road it was, but I remember it was spinning just kind of very slowly like a top.
So
And
slowly, like, so if you've ever been in an airplane, or like in a propeller-based airplane,
Mhm,
you're sitting in the cockpit,
right.
or if you just look on YouTube, you can watch pilots who are landing. And because of the frame rate of a camera, right, it just looks real choppy. It looks like you can watch the one blade move, right? But this is just
Hmm.
an optical illusion. When you
Right.
said that it was spinning, that you could see it slowly spin,
Hmm.
was it that kind of effect, or was it legit, like just slowly moving?
I mean, I thought it was, you know, hovering in midair, and like there was, like it was spinning. So almost like if you think of like a polyhedral dice, what an eight-sided dice or whatever, kind of on its axis and just kind of, you know, rotating, but above the ground.
That's wild.
And I remember it. I remember it was metallic, or metallic-esque, and that's why I think it. That's why I think, you know, at that age I knew what a top was or whatever, spinny, and that's why I think I probably made the association.
That's interesting. So when you it was metallic, why did you think it was metallic? Was that because it was
It was like,
reflective,
yeah,
or
it was reflective. It was silver aluminum colored. You know, almost like I would say it was. It wasn't as like, it was duller than like an aircraft aluminum, but
like the flip side of foil?
maybe, maybe, yeah, that's probably a good analogy. It was.
Hmm.
I mean, I saw it, and my parents saw it, and so there were, you know, multiple people, and they still actually, they, for whatever reason, one of the last gatherings I had with them, we were talking kind of about our different encounters, and my mom had brought this up, and I told her, you know, I remember it, and so she was surprised because I was pretty young, but yeah, I think something like that probably sticks in your psyche. You know what you're witnessing isn't, I guess, possible through any explanation.
So with your mom remembering, she brought it up. Is this like recently?
Yeah, this was when they were back from their Florida home last summer, so it would have been probably September,
So
I
just out of
think.
the blue, was your mom like, "Oh, yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah,
we
Darin,
were
when you make pizza rolls, make sure you put the
right.
pizza rolls
No,
on
we
the
were
side of the foil that is like that dull look." You remember like that UFO we saw?
no. It was we were talking. I don't know, remember how we quite got on the subject, but we just kind of started talking about these things, and then she had brought up that story about talking to my dad actually about it, because they were kind of recounting some of the encounters that they had had, and she brought that up, and I was like, yeah, I remember that.
That's crazy. I mean, to see something like that, I think at a young age too, like everything is new. So if you see something that's strange and unusual,
Hmm.
everything kind of is strange and unusual. So it kind of begs the question, like psychologically, how did your mind know to press record? You know what I mean?
It's a good question. So, I mean, maybe at that point, and I can't quite remember because I was so focused on this object I was looking at, but maybe, you know, it was due to the way my parents were reacting.
Right.
You know, other stimuli that I wasn't quite conscious of, but it was definitely there, and that's, I mean, most likely why. I mean, it was I don't know that it was traumatic per se, but it was, it was something out of the ordinary, and I knew it was something out of the ordinary, and that's probably why it's stuck with me all these years.
Yeah, my own encounter is probably not as vivid, and I only have one person who saw it with me. They say that every time you remember something, your mind changes it just a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to be conscious of these potential changes that might be occurring in my brain as I
Right.
recall this each time. So I almost like psych myself out like I didn't really see that, did I?
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way.
Right.
So when I think about that, um, it does have me question things. My encounter was 2000. I really could probably do some digging, and I could probably look up if there was something that night, and I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
But it must have been 2000. No, like 1999.
Yeah. How old were you? About how old?
Yeah, I would have been like 17 or 18. No, probably 17.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been 17. So it would have been 98. It was in Gurnee, Illinois. I was working at a local Sam's Club,
Well,
and I couldn't work inside because it was a warehouse. And in the state of Illinois, you have to be 18 to work in the warehouse.
right.
So I was a cart pusher. I was making $8.50 an hour pushing carts, which was pretty decent cheddar back in
Yeah,
1998.
that was not bad.
But yeah, like I remember my buddy Wayne and we both got this gig together, and I would like wait until after Dragon Ball Z was over so that I could then not miss that show and then go to work.
Mm-hmm.
I'd drive to work, and we had a great time. And so this one night, it's dark out. I remember it's summertime. So, it's probably like 8 o'clock because it was truly dark enough to see lights in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And like I take pause when I'm trying to remember it because I want to give the impression that I'm really not trying to be biased about what I saw and
Right.
embellish. But this is a large parking lot. Like think of a Costco parking lot, so Sam's Club, the equivalent.
Yeah. Right.
And Wayne, my buddy, and I decided to push in a huge row of carts. When you were a cart guy pre 2000, before like labor laws said you could like only push 10 carts at a time,
Yeah.
we would get like 60 carts in a row,
Mm-hmm.
big ass carts, and just push these rows. And one guy would like guide the front, and you would just, you know, push the hell out of this thing. And
Right.
so Wayne and I we just got like a big enough stack. There was only two of us working, and we wanted to fill up the cart base. So we go out and we scoop up all these carts, and I start pushing it up. And just as I get to the point where like you would cross the roadway that crosses right in front of the store.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like store, like road, first parking spots, and then out, right? So right there. Now the store itself is tall. You look up, you're like, oh man, that's big, you know. And I looked up and out, and I could see the edge of the store, the top of the roof,
Mm-hmm.
and then this multicolored fireball that so like in the frame that you see me, let's see if I can do this. This is my lens cap.
Right.
So from the top of the screen, it did this. Like as big as that is.
Yeah.
But now remind yourself that this is coming over the top of a building and it's high in the air, but
Right.
it's still this big. So this thing was like whenever I watch like some show about UFOs, somebody mentions that it's it was as big as a football field. And I'm
Right.
like, bullshit. But this thing had to have been half a football field, maybe. But I remember it was circular in shape. It was more round on the front end. It tapered toward the back as if the flames, were tapering off.
Right.
But this, I swear to God, I thought it was a comet. But I'm like, I know what that should look like. And this was like green flame, red flames, blue flames. Like you could see. So flame color indicates several things, right? Like chemical compositions of the burn
Right.
and the heat signature or how hot some of these things are. And I just I couldn't tell you how or what it was. But after it flew over, whoosh, so it would have been traveling. That was east and west. So traveling north toward Lake Michigan.
Okay.
And where we're only 20 minutes from the lake as it is.
Right.
So traveling straight north and just a little nudge to the east, and you'd be in the water. So this thing like flies overhead, and I'm just awestruck. My mouth's like, whoa,
Yeah.
And then Wayne comes up with his row of cards. And Wayne is not like the kind of guy, he's kind of a plain dude, like muscle cars and whatever. Like he would see something and maybe he would say, huh. And then it would be gone. I was like, Wayne, did you see that? And he says, yeah. I said, what was it? He goes, dude, I don't know. I said, was it an airplane? Not unless it was on fire. And then, as soon as that happened, I want to say 3, but maybe it was 1. I just don't trust my memory. Helicopters flew over and like chased it.
Interesting.
But the helicopters that they were, if you've ever worked if maybe you work at an airport, I worked at an airport for several years, so I know the type of sound this was. And it was straight up, it's the Huey, right? Like the Vietnam, the one that like you really hear that buffeting of the blades and it just shakes your chest. That's what flew overhead, and that's what chased this thing toward the lake. So that was my first encounter, and I never forgot it. It was definitely weird. And I was 17 years old. I mean, I'm 39 now, and it's been
an old man.
Huh?
You're an old man.
I'm an old man.
I am an old man.
With that old man beard. People
say, we both got the gray.
You should tell people, how do you get that kind of gray? Well, you have to have an encounter first.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
So you had another encounter, though. It sounds like you've had
I've had quite a few. So I want to say that the next one was probably, I don't quite remember the year. The kids were doing tumbling. So I'm going to say probably 2008, 2009. They had a tumbling national meet in Charleston, West Virginia. And so we drove to Charleston, and we were on our way back from the weekend meet, and we're going to my parents said we're dog sitting or pet sitting our dogs. So we were on 65 North, going from Indy basically towards the Chicagoland area. And we would cut over on a rural route to take us through Momence, Illinois, to get to the Bradley Bourbonnais area. And I remember while I was sitting in the car, my wife was at the time was driving, and we were going basically ahead were, you know, the blinking red lights of a wind farm. If you've seen a wind farm, and at the top of these windmills, there's those blinking red lights. Well, I noticed that there were like these 5 red lights just kind of stationary in the sky. And we got closer and closer to them, and they were just hanging there in the sky. So we got to our exit, and we got to the top of the exit, and we were turning to the west to go towards my parents' place. And I had my wife at the time stop the car, and I got out of the car and went over as far as I could, because it's kind of like, we just got off the highway, so there's the overpass over the highway. I'm looking at these things, and just perfectly spaced red lights, and just probably stood there and looked at them for, it was a few minutes. I remember my kids were freaking out because they saw them, and I was like, it's a UFO. And then they're like, oh no, the aliens are gonna, you have typical kid panic. And the lights just blinked off. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe it's flares. I'm looking in the sky, seeing if I see any aircraft. They're not like dripping off. A typical military flare is going to have like the flame and that kind of dripping off the side, if you will. I don't know how better to explain it. These were just perfectly spaced lights in the sky, almost like the thing that I equate it to is like the Phoenix lights. You've seen, video or whatever, the Phoenix lights.
Yeah. The Phoenix lights, though, I'm real critical of those. Like, I feel like the Phoenix lights, I don't know if maybe they've been debunked yet, but the debunk that I saw for them feels like maybe it was legit, which they said that they thought it was exactly what you said, military flares dropping. But then they said, well, they don't drop that slow, and that one's kind of a weird one. But when you say like it was so evenly spaced, for me, the way I think of that is, well, the only way to really be evenly spaced is that if it was one singular thing, with the inner space in between is invisible.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought it after kind of having seen it and taking it in. That was somewhat of my conclusion, that it was probably I would have thought a single craft. I just couldn't see the rest of it, and for whatever reason was able to see these evenly spaced lights on it, for lack of a better term. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just, a horizontal row of 5 lights hanging in the sky. Red. They were red. So they were basically a little off the red of the red blinking lights, because those are kind of a brighter red. These were much more, I guess, duller but they were, they were red.
That's crazy. I had one other experience with UFOs or a sighting, which was I had left my house traveling west, and as I'm traveling west, I'm taking this kind of shortcut, hollow road or whatever. That usually it's got a few houses on these. Every town has this road, right? It's like dark, no street lights, lots of vegetation, tall trees, a few sparse houses. It's late at night. I'm driving over my girlfriend's house, and this is like the stretch of road where we always friggin' just hammer the gas, right? And you jump the train tracks kind of road.
Right.
Uh, and so I pick up my girlfriend and we're driving back. So now we're heading the opposite direction east, and off to the right, like there's a regional airport around. So I'm used to
Mhm.
seeing some airplanes or whatever.
Right.
And I remember like a small light, not like an airplane light, like too
Mhm.
small, like almost you walk into a room at nighttime and you see like some LED like power
Right.
light, little,
Right. Hmm.
and it was bluish white. And I'm like, ah, star, that's a bright star. Is that Polaris? I'm like, no,
Hmm.
looking the wrong way. Blah 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 blah, making all these little mental notes, and then I notice, oh, it's like it's tracking right alongside the car, and I told my girlfriend, I said, look at that, that's crazy, and she says, yeah, and I slowed down. I'm sure she was thinking I was slowing down, and I'm making up some story so that we could
Right.
make out or something. UFOs. This is how you get to second, third, and fourth base, bro. Um, so then this thing just is making erratic movements.
Mhm.
Like before I understood physics, like you just think, oh yeah, planes could probably do that. And now there's no way something just like shoots forward and goes straight up and
Right.
then like zigzags around. Like there's nothing called inertia.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was the second time I saw something, but I couldn't tell you what it was. I mean,
Right.
it behaved very erratic, like so swamp gas. I just don't know.
Uh, yeah. How far away from the car do you think it was, if you had to judge distance wise?
100 miles. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Like it was high enough and out there. So it
Hmm.
probably wasn't 100 miles, It was probably like 50 miles away. But in that kind of darkness, you can see,
Yeah.
especially that time of the year. Uh, I don't know. Here, in the Midwest, it always seems like the clearer the night, the colder it is.
Yes. Yeah. I'd
Uh,
agree.
so for me, it was probably cold, right? And so it was a clear night, and yeah, thinking back on it, I can just like you want to act out the motions, It's like, oh, I turned. It's like, oh shit, what is that? Yeah, it was crazy, and I think that changed my perspective for a long time. I grew up watching shows like Sightings. Do you
Hmm.
remember Sightings?
Oh yeah, I do.
Produced by Henry Winkler, the Fonz. Did you
Fonz,
know
yeah.
that?
I did not. I did not know the Fonz produced that, but
Yeah, dude.
oh, I mean, I grew up. I'm a little older than you. I'm about. You were born in what, 82?
81.
Oh, you were 81. So I was born in 73. So you're gonna be the big 4-0 this year, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, scary.
I don't know. Is it?
So I remember like shows like Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, watching that.
Oh, that
Um,
show is the best. I used to skip school to watch that shit.
there was he used to have like a Ripley's Believe It or Not show that
With Jack Palance?
I think it was Jack Palance. I remember watching that. So yeah, I remember
I watched your reruns, it sounds like.
probably. Well, I was watching. I think I was watching reruns at that point. Who knows? But the Believe It or Not stuff, I know for sure was the first airing of it, and I only remember this because I remember watching. I remember I was watching it. My grandmother was watching me when my baby brother was born, and they got the call from the hospital that from my dad that I had a brother. So that's a pretty vivid memory of watching. Remembering what show I was watching when I heard that news.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, definitely been. definitely, and then I think because of it was openly discussed in our family because of, my parents both having experiences. So it was, it wasn't something that was, I think, taboo. They would discuss it pretty openly and freely, their experiences.
It feels like having open parents makes it easier to see those kinds of things. I think a lot of people struggle when they see some stuff, right? Because they don't know how to like reconcile it with their upbringing, whether that's religious, or maybe it's just a strict dogmatic view of science, or what's possible. My mom was raised Roman Catholic. I was also raised like kind of Roman Catholic, but my
I
mom
was
also
I was
my
raised Roman Catholic as well.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really get much more mystical than that in a religious sense for
I
Western
know.
Christianity.
I know. I actually, it's funny because I would call myself probably a non-practicing or recovering Catholic, but I mean, now knowing more about world religions and you're definitely right. It is completely, yeah, it's completely probably one of the most mystical religions.
And so like that's a really interesting juxtapose in itself, or not. That might not be the right word for this, but thinking about how what a mystical process that Roman Catholicism kind of imparts if you're into it and you study what is contained within that system,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then realizing that that part of mystical experience is totally real, but what you just saw, not so much.
Yeah.
That could be hard to reconcile. So my mom was Roman Catholic, and then I think in the '80s, she really got turned on to like the whole Shirley MacLaine crystals and shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
New Age stuff.
yeah, she loved New Age, and I don't know, man. I've always kind of been a New Ager myself,
Mm,
um, and I think that's just because of how like open the system is, and asking about, well, how did you feel about that? Like that whole thing. There was not as much dogma. I think
right.
that allowed me to believe more, at least have an open mind. I mean, I remember watching the season, the series premiere of Sightings, and I mean those were like key events, right? Like Sightings, and then Alien Autopsy, and then shit, what else?
Oh,
Uh,
like there was a special they used to run on Fox with Jonathan Frakes, who played William Reich,
yes,
Next Generation, and it was what was it called? The best UFO sightings caught on tape or something like that.
yep,
I
yeah, and
remember
that show
watching
was
those.
that show was really cool. And then I remember seeing uh, he's probably one of the best tools, and I call him a tool. I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, dude is straight up the most
Mm,
knowledgeable that I know. Is when he's only like months older than me when he wrote to get his first FOIA, his Freedom of Information Act, on the Iran sighting slash military op thing that happened. And he
mm,
got this document, and he was like, "Holy cow!" And he was like 13 years old, and so he's been operating in the FOIA sphere since he was like 13. And I remember he got interviewed for the first time, um, like I think it was on Sightings or one of those shows, and that's John Greenwald
oh,
of
okay.
Black Vault.
Right. Yeah.
The Black Vault. So, and of course, Black Vault deals with a tons of other stuff besides UFO stuff. But I think the UFO phenomenon and everything that's been coming out recently has really given his website some great traffic. And so, if anybody out there who's listening or watching this, I would definitely suggest checking out Black Vault for any number of like UFO documents or Freedom of Information requests. I mean, he's got stuff that's like 100% redacted, just black lined out.
Yeah.
Um, it's really cool. I remember those things, growing up, and then I remember hosting parties at my house. Like I'd have like three friends over, and I would push like one of those garage sale tables up to my bedroom windows. I had two in a
Mhm.
row, and we just like set out friggin' Doritos and like Mountain Dews and try to stay awake all night, you know. And
Mhm.
it's like I had a view straight north over my neighbor's house, and we just never saw anything. And I went through a point in my life, I think, where I thought, this is all bullshit.
Right.
Like there's nothing out there. And then I started reading Carl Sagan, and I was like, I'm full of bullshit. There's no way nothing else is out there.
Right.
How about you, man? What was your kind of first thing to get sucked into this topic?
Um, well, I think other than it being just kind of not a taboo subject in my household, some sightings that my dad had and recounted to us, um, got made me very interested in the subject. So I remember I would probably checked out every book on UFOs that the Bradley Public Library had at the time, which I'm sure there weren't that many, but um, I just would read. I was a voracious reader. In fact, it's kind of funny. I remember this vividly. My mom bought me some coloring books, and there was a coloring book that I had that basically was like UFO tales. So like each page was like a different famous UFO sighting. So it had had like uh, the one in Michigan. You referenced the one about the swamp gas. So like it had that entire story, and I remember, coloring. You could color. They had pictures of the UFOs or whatever. You could color in whatever you.
We should reissue this, right? But like an adult version that's got Jesse Marcel on the floor, and just call it like it'll be Jesse Marcel. You get to color him when he's like holding up the trash, right?
Yeah.
And then like we'll just caption it like Jesse Marcel's "What the fuck" moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like that. I mean, it had it had the different tales, if you will, of these different sightings, and so it was almost like that in a way.
How do you? I think a couple movies stood out to me in terms of like UFOs and aliens over the years.
Mhm.
I think Close Encounters,
Oh,
the
definitely.
film was
Yeah.
definitely one. I didn't see that in the theater. Years later, when they re-released it digitally, remastered it, I took my mom to see it, and
Yeah.
we sat through that. Man, it was it was really cool just to take my mom to see that movie. But the movies I remember growing up were when they did Fire in the Sky, the Travis Walton
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. The Walton story.
Dude, that my wife just the other night, she asked me, she was like, "Fire in the Sky, what's that about?" And I had to tell her, and she's like, "Oh, that's easy. The loggers murdered that guy. Easy. That's gonna be on Cold Case." And I'm like,
Murdered
"But
him.
they didn't."
They showed back up right
They
after.
showed up and they corroborated everything.
Yeah.
And there's a new doc out actually on Travis Walton that I want to see. I guess they got the whole gang back together and they're all talking, and like I don't know if they're together,
Right.
but they're interviewing them. We should do that. That's going to be something that I think we're going to do, right? If y'all are listening, right, this is a pilot. Uh, I don't know, podcast, vidcast with Darin and I talking about this kind of stuff. But we should do in the future if this takes off is do a watch party of that film and just live comment through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Fire in the Sky and HBO did one. It was a film about Roswell, and it starred uh, the dude from Dune in the original Dune movie, who was Muad'Dib.
Uh, Kyle MacLachlan.
Is that him? He was also in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah. So he played Jesse Marcel, Senior.
Oh, I don't know that I ever saw that.
Dude, it was glorious. I think I have it on VHS tape downstairs.
Dating yourself there.
Yeah, well, I think I taped it off of HBO.
Right.
And, whatever. What about you, man? Any UFO films that really stuck out to you?
Definitely Close Encounters and Fire in the Sky. I have the film is hilarious. I view it more as a comedy, but I remember reading the book Communion by Whitley Strieber,
Oh, dude,
and
I tore the cover off that book
yeah, it freaked
because
you out that much.
it just has that gray staring
Yeah,
at you.
yeah, yeah,
I was creeped the hell out.
yeah. I think it was.
My mom thinks it's because I was abducted and I'm scared of it.
Yeah, that's. Uh,
But
so
Communion, the movie's not good.
I view it more as a comedy. So Christopher Walken plays the main character in it, and um, there are just some scenes in with Walken's enunciation and his mannerisms and that I view it. I can't take the film seriously.
Is he like? He's like, I was abducted. Aliens.
Somewhat. So I remember vividly. There's a scene where he's like on a bus and he boards the bus and then realizes like there are a bunch of aliens on the bus.
Oh.
And I remember him saying like as he could, and I'm not going to try to do a walk-in, but he's like, it's a fucking ambush or something. So yeah, there are just these scenes like that, and you would have to watch the movie, I think, to get it. But I think after watching it, you'd probably say the same thing, that it's
there's a string of Christopher Walken movies that I just adore, but they are definitely dated and would not be the same movie without his kind of strange emphasis and aggression in the way he says certain words. Brainstorm. You ever see that movie?
Yeah, I remember.
That's a tight movie too. But so Communion. What else?
Fire in the Sky, like you said. Close Encounters, like you said. Trying to think.
I watched one when I was like maybe 15, 16. I was probably like 14 or 15. Maybe 13. You see I'm doing this? I'm just going backwards. It was between 10 and 15 years old.
Right.
We went to this joint called Jim's Pantry, and he had this video rental section. Of course, it had the naughty section, but somewhere off to the left,
the naughty section, barely hidden by the velvet curtain or whatever. That's
yeah. I think this was a cheap ass shop, so it was like a shower curtain.
Yeah, right.
You were like, oh, boobies. But yeah, we rented like Traces of Death, right? Like the knockoff of Faces of Death.
Yeah.
And then we watched this movie called Official Denial. This was a crazy movie. Basically, the aliens are legit. They have one in captivity. This guy who kind of knows computers, the government calls in or something. I'm trying to remember what happens, but basically, they name the alien. They call him IBM or something because that's the computer he was on. And then the truth comes out that they're not aliens. They're just us from the future. And they come back and they like take biological components, whether those like ovum or spermatozoa, whatever, to complete so that they can breed in the future because they've lost the ability to procreate.
Yeah.
So this is them coming back, taking what they need and heading back out to the future.
Well, that's one of the theories, right? That's always been a theory, that it's not actually aliens per se, that this is us from the future, and that's happened to us, and that's why That's why women in the that have been abducted, talk about having their eggs taken from them, and some have pregnancies that just kind of disappear, and then they claim that they've been shown their hybrid child, after at some point in the future. So who knows? I mean, that's the thing about this. Who knows? Is it another civilization? Is it us from the future? I think both are
lot of plausibility.
plausible.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it feels like we don't know, but there's enough people who've been tested. Either that's been on, polygraph or expert psychological opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and it just can't be all mass hysteria, right?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you a story that my dad relays to me. So he was a young man, and he was at his grandfather's farm. And he relates, this would have been probably early 50s. So my dad was born in 46. So he was probably somewhere between, I would say, 4 to maybe 6 at the time. And they saw a cigar shaped craft, like silhouetted. It was a full moon, and he said that they saw that this cigar shaped craft kind of, silhouetted in front of the moon, if you will. And at that time, he said he remembers his grandfather, because it was pretty much the start of the Cold War, and his grandfather called. I'm guessing the Air Force Base down here in Rantoul, which was active at that time, and this would have been the Kankakee area outside of Kankakee, and to report it. And he remembers a Air Force officer coming out, and he said the Air Force officer had a book, and he was showing his grandfather this book, and inside the book it pictures or like illustrations of different craft. And he said, we think this is a mothership, and he said we think that the occupants look like this. And so, I mean, take that as you will, but I think at that time, early 50s, it would have been, I don't know that the lid of secrecy would have been as tight as it is now. So I think that our government has a pretty good idea of at least what these things are. I do believe that something happened at Roswell. I find it very hard to believe that air that are the U.S. Army Air Corps at that time, it wasn't even the Air Force yet, would report that they captured a flying saucer if it wasn't a flying saucer, and truly a weather balloon, like they tried to spin it. So I think I think that these things probably, if they're mechanical, have like anything mechanical, can break down. And so I remember reading a book, and I don't know if you've read the book or not. It's called The Day After Roswell, and it's by
Philip J. Corso.
Corso, yeah. And it describes basically how a lot of the technology that we have has basically been fed to corporations from the crash at Roswell and other crashes. And I don't know. I mean, if you do think about it, the technology has, since, I would say World War II, exponentially, blown up. I mean, if you were to graph it, you were using, cathode tubes and and such, and in 10 years, 15 years, you've got computers. You're using, sure, they were large, I mean, at that point, but um I don't know. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not. It's just, I also don't want to, I don't want to demean or, take away the fact that, the ingenuity of the human species is outstanding, and that some of these things are probably, things that we just invented, but it makes you think about it.
It does. I think about things like Roswell. My thoughts on Roswell, we could probably talk all night about just that one, but when I think about that particular instance, 1947,
Mm,
the film was really good, well done. There was a guy who was playing uh, Mac Brazel,
uh,
and two things he said when he was like talking about it, and I don't know if this was lifted directly from things Mac Brazel, the rancher whose land this UFO fell on, of what he said. I don't know if this is true things he said or was embellished by the movies, but
right,
it was legit. The radio announcer guy who's like, so the crash happens. Mac Brazel talks. Military announces UFO. Hits the page of the Roswell paper, which I have a facsimile copy, full size poster sheet of hanging up right over there. And then retracts the story like the next day or a couple days
right,
later. Um, and so then the local radio is like, "Hey, Mac, come on the old radio show and talk about it." And he's like,
right,
"Oh, whatever, whatever." And I think he's told by the military he's got to go on this radio program and say, "Oh, it was nothing."
right.
And then when the dead air happens, the guy says, "Now come on, Mac, tell me something real." And he says, "Well, you know those little green men?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, they're not green."
Hmm,
Right? And then and then earlier in the episode when the military is like giving a third degree to Mac Brazel, they were telling him like it's a weather balloon. And he's like, "How the hell does a weather balloon affect national security?" You know? And so uh I don't know if you ever read the books, right? Roswell Declassified or
I
whatever.
did, yeah. I read
That was such a
that.
bullshit story.
Oh,
Like microphones on weather balloons.
right. Yeah, it was Project. Was it Project Mogul? Was
Yeah.
they said, and they were detecting. They were weather balloons that they'd send up to detect nuclear testing in the Soviet Union, I think, and somehow the microphones were able to detect the.
Rupture waves or whatever.
So, yeah,
Yeah. It was bizarre. And then the other thing about Roswell that weirds me out, I think, is the fact that something crashed. Like
yeah,
alien debris to me is weird because I keep thinking, y'all just traveled how many billions of miles to like, oh, whoops,
right,
sorry, I, I fucked up. Alien screwed up, crashes the airplane or crashes the craft. Yet it makes me wonder more along these lines of hyperdimensional travel.
hmm,
Do we see UFOs jump or skip around because they're just like it's here, you see it pass through some sort of weird window where you can see it for a second, and it is traveling in a rate where you could see it, but it appears in a blink over here because it passed through, some area of space that you can't see.
hmm,
Um, and then maybe something happened wrong with that, right? And then boom,
right,
maybe that's why it crashed. So it's hard to reconcile such advanced technology crashing. But
right.
but as you said, if it's mechanical, then maybe it's true. There's all those people who also report the UFOs when they're moving slowly. They're like not stable or something.
Mm. Yeah, there's like I've heard a distortion. Like I've heard people say like it looks like, on a hot summer day, and if you look at the asphalt and the heat kind of deflecting the light off the asphalt, something like that. Um, Another encounter I had was in my front yard. I was with letting the dog out, and she likes to go out in the front yard. And
Are you sure it wasn't just toxic fumes from the dog's excrement?
possible. No, and I remember seeing like something caught my eye, and there was like this white light just coming like straight down from the sky, and it like hit a certain point. It was probably 100 feet, 200 feet um, above the ground, and it did a 90-degree turn and went basically in a straight line, and it went over my house through the backyard and continued kind of south, would have been southeast. And I've got a potato video of it from my cell phone somewhere. I know I saved it on somewhere.
What's a potato video?
Like potato quality, because the camera,
Okay.
so it's just basically a blurry light that's, that you're trying to track with your phone at the time.
Yeah.
And this was probably early smartphone technology. So I don't know that it was probably 2012, 2013, somewhere in there when this happened. So yeah, and it was just like I said, it was just a white light. It was, like there was no discernible shape of a craft or anything like that. No sound. The thing was going pretty fast, and that's
That's
the
that's
thing.
noticeable, right? No sound.
Right.
Because even when I talked about the fireball over Sam's Club, there was no
Mhm.
sound.
Yeah.
I heard the helicopters.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. Are these things? Are they creating some sort of gravitational bubble around them? Because I mean these things are doing incredible speeds, and we know. I don't know if you've ever heard a plane break the sound barrier or not, but you hear it and you feel it.
Yeah, I distinctly recall, working at an airport on a couple occasions for an air show. We've had special requests from the gents who work in the tower control, who are ex-military, and they've said, "Hey, give us a little something since you're leaving." You know, Plane flies over the tower, and then you can watch their back end. They shut off. It looks like they shut off everything, and it just like just kind of glides,
Right.
and then the back end starts to fall, and it starts gliding down, and then they fire up this afterburners, and just this explosion, and they're bam, they're
Right.
gone, and that feeling in your chest. South Park used to joke about the brown noise. If
Mm-hmm.
there's a brown noise, if there's a noise that makes you shit your pants, it's that explosion, that happens when that happens. Or there's another airplane called an MU-2. It's made by Mitsubishi. It is the wonkiest airplane ever, but people love these things. But when these turbines start spinning, whatever reason, the frequency, the buffeting of the air, whatever, your insides shake loose. I mean, it's wild. But these things, so much power, no sound.
Right.
It's pretty wild. Well, I know it's getting close to the hour mark on this. I want to kind of wrap this up, I think, for our first episode, talking about our experiences. And if we get enough people who start liking this or listening to it, I think Darin and I will continue to do some of these recorded conversations. And maybe next time we'll just pick a singular event. What do you think?
At some point talk to you about your adventures at Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh yeah, yeah. And for that, I think we got to get on another friend of ours, Ben Williams, who went out. Ben and I decided on a whim that we would visit Skinwalker Ranch. That we would just fly. I would fly out to Denver, and then from Denver we would drive in. And we did. And I had the whole like I left my audio, my Zoom recorder recording the entire time while we were hiking out there. Trespassing,
Right?
Little bit of trespassing, a little bit of
But
public.
so Dragon didn't come out and harass you guys.
No, kind of letting out some secret information that'll be coming out in an article I'm putting together for publication. But while we were hiking, keep in mind I had been in Denver, right, and I live in Illinois, so I'm starting to dehydrate.
Yeah,
it was bad. So I started getting some heart palpitations from the hike that we were going across out there. So I was like, well, let me hydrate up. And I had to sit on this rock. And Ben said, Robert, I'm just going to go on ahead a little bit. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to sit right here. He goes, all right, well, I said, just be careful, don't slide down. I said, okay. So we're on the top of almost like a mesa area.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, Robert, come here. So I get up and I walk over. And if you watch the show that they created about Skinwalker, there's they shot rockets up.
Yeah.
And they lost a couple.
Right.
Well, Ben and I found it.
He did.
So we picked up the rocket. We hiked all the way back with it. Ben carried it most of the way.
Yeah.
We threw it in the car. We drove to the front gate of Skinwalker.
Yeah.
And we just set the rocket down and waited. Like, hey, we just want to talk. We have your rocket. And nobody ever came out. And then we started walking toward the gate.
Yeah.
And then there's a sign that says, if you can read this, the police have already been notified of your presence. Leave now.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And Ben's like, that's not real. I'm a lawyer. It's like, okay. So anyway, yeah, it was a good time. And I think that would be a good conversation to have for sure. But anything you want to add before we wrap up this episode, Darin?
No, sir.
If you all missed it, Darin's got the best shirt on. You got to show everybody your shirt.
It's my it's from I think Wicked T-shirts, and it's like the Big Book of Conspiracy Theories. So it's got it's got the symbol near and dear to some of us.
Everything you know is a lie.
Yeah. Everything you know is a lie. The flat Earth here, little. I guess he's more green, I think, than gray. But
I kind of love that the alien has a weird mark under his right eye. Did he go to prison and kill a man?
Yes, he did. I think he got that's his prison tap. So, intergalactic prison, Robert. He did some very hard time.
Some hard time in intergalactic prison. Stab. It's like, no, I didn't stab a man. I stabbed, some wild-eyed creature from the other side of the galaxy. Well, Darin, thanks for hopping on. Everybody out there, if you like this, check it out again. Keep an eye out. Subscribe on iTunes to the program, and we'll try to have more episodes out as we get together and talk about the strange and unusual.